Hey there, I'm Lindsay from Cake and Commerce, and today we're going to make gluten-free graham crackers. Love this recipe. It's really pretty easy. Nice thing about graham crackers is it's a whole grain cracker, and so gluten-free, which is mostly going to be whole grains, doesn't taste all that much different, and it's just as versatile. You can use it in pie crusts and eat it on its own, use it in s'mores. It does all the same things that a regular graham cracker does. Plus, it's got the benefit of being made by you at home. So let me show you how I make my graham crackers. First thing I do is in a food processor, and I like doing it in a food processor. I don't have to sift. I don't have to do anything. It's super simple. It comes together. I put buckwheat. Just put that in the bowl. I have some rice bran. That gives it a little extra nutrition. I put in some sweet brown rice flour, finely ground, because if you use the coarse ground rice flour, it tastes a little grainy. And the last ingredient in the flours is teff. And teff is a tiny grain. It's grown domestically in the US, and it's used in Ethiopian bread, but it also has the benefit of having a similar similar nutrition to regular flour. So while it doesn't have gluten, it behaves in a very similar way. So it's a great substitute. It doesn't have a strong aftertaste. It's a little pricey, but if you can find it, I definitely recommend it for gluten-free baked goods. Last thing is teff. And then I throw in a little rapadura sugar, and that's evaporated cane juice. It's still sugar, but it's marginally better for you and it's less processed. So for folks who are vegan or want some more minerals in their sugar, rapadura is the way to go. So now I'm just going to pulse it for, I don't know, a couple seconds if I can figure out how to get this on. And just to sort of mix all the ingredients together. When the color's uniform, I'll stop and I'll add my wet ingredients. Actually, before I do that, I want to throw in my salt, just a little of that, and some baking soda and some baking powder. That helps it rise. Okay. The other thing that using a Cuisinart or a food processor does that you don't get with a mixer is sometimes with the rice bran, there's a little bit of chaff in it, and it'll grind it down a touch so you won't taste it. There's usually not much, but in case there is. Okay, so now I'm going to add my wet ingredients. In this bowl, I've combined coconut oil, honey, and water. Now, you don't need to use coconut oil or honey. You can use agave syrup. You can use any kind of syrup that you like. I happen to like the flavor of honey, so I use honey. You also don't need to use coconut oil, but I really like coconut oil as a fat. It's slightly better for you. You can use vegetable oil. You could use melted butter. Any of those fats will do. I've just chosen coconut, and I also kind of like the flavor of it. So I just pour my coconut, water, and honey mixture in, and then just a little bit of vanilla for flavor. At this point, I could also have added some cinnamon, but I decided to keep this plain just in case I want to use this in, I don't know, a cheesecake or something. So we're just going to mix it until it comes together. Okay, and there it is. So take a look at this. Now this dough is particularly wet. Sometimes it's more wet than other times. If you let the dough sit, the flour will absorb a lot of the moisture. It's going to become easier to roll out. It's also a little warm at this point. So I'm just going to put it onto a sheet of parchment, and then I'm going to flatten it out and let it sit for a bit, probably about 30 minutes. Sometimes I can roll it out right away. Just depends. Some days it's, I don't know, easier than other days. Also, you can, if you want to work with it right away, you can add a little more flour, but you'll see. It pretty much firms up pretty quickly. So while the dough has been sitting, I've covered it in plastic so it doesn't dry out. I preheated the oven, and now we're going to be able to cut this up and roll it out. So let me just take off about half of it because there's a lot of dough in this. Set it aside. At this point, you could actually take this and freeze it, as long as you wrap it up pretty tightly in plastic. Do yourself a favor if you're going to do that and flatten it out a bit. It'll just make rolling out easier later on. So, just going to set that aside, and I'm going to try to get this into more of a square. I'm going to want to roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch. I don't want to do it directly on the dough because it will stick. So we're going to use some plastic wrap. If you don't want to use plastic wrap, you can always use a Silpat pad or anything else you happen to have around. You can use a sheet of parchment. I like the plastic. I like being able to see when I'm rolling it out. So that's why I use plastic. So just set it on there, pull out the handy rolling pin, and we're just going to roll it back and forth, starting in the middle, and turn it. Try to be as even as possible because we're going to cut directly on the sheet. And don't worry about going too thin. This stuff puffs up a lot. Okay, so at this point, I like to put it directly on my sheet pan. It's okay if you get a little on the side here. You can just cut it off and work it into your dough. Because there's no gluten in here, you don't have to worry about it getting too elasticy or rubbery. You can just work it back in. Same on the side. If you decided you were going to make something like, a Mallomars type marshmallow cookie, you can just take a dough cutter and cut circles at this point. I'm just going to cut simple squares out of it. I want to make some s'mores later, so that's what I'm going to do. But first I'll take off some more of the edges. Save the dough. Okay, so just simple grid pattern. No, I'm not a perfectionist. I don't care if it's a perfect rectangle or square. I just want it to taste good. So just going to cut square-ish things. All right, so we've got a grid. And the next thing we want to do is brush on a little water. If you like egg wash, you can do egg wash. I prefer water. All I'm trying to do is get some sugar, a little garnish, to stick. So just brush it on. You don't need too much. It gets a little milky at the top, but then I have this turbinado sugar in the raw that I'm going to sprinkle over it, and it makes for a nice texture, and it also gets a little crunchy and it's shiny, so really like that a lot. Now I want to dock the crackers. When you think of graham crackers, they always have some holes at the top, so I'm just going to go get a fork and dock these, put holes on top of each of these. If you happen to have a docking roller, great, use that. I don't. I'm going to go get a fork. Okay, real simple. I mean, you can get fancy if you want. If you want to put your, initial on there or smiley face. I'm just going to go down the line and try to put them down the middle. And the side ones, I don't care. Probably will turn them into graham cracker crumbs. So I don't really worry about that too much. Now it's ready to go in the oven. So my oven has been set to 325. I want to keep the oven heat a little lower. If it's too high, it'll crisp up too quickly. The edges will brown faster than the center. We want this to cook really evenly and slowly. I could even lower the oven to 300 and increase the baking time. 325 is fine now, and I'm going to leave it in for about a half an hour. I'll check it probably around minute 20 just to see how it's browning. This will darken very quickly once it starts to brown. Last night I was making a batch just to practice, and man, I put it in an oven that was cooling down and it totally burned and the batch was lost. So you do have to watch them slightly carefully because some of these grains will sort of darken and get bitter quickly. So. So here they are, the finished grams. They look just like grams you get out of the package. I probably could have rolled them a little thinner. They puffed up quite a bit, as I mentioned that they would. One tip, when they come out of the oven while they're still warm, in fact, while they're still piping hot, take your pastry cutter and just cut those lines again, or else it'll be a little more difficult to break them apart. They'll still break apart, they just probably won't break apart perfectly and be as straight along the edges. Yeah, so here they are. They're ready to eat, or they're ready to be used for pie crust. You just would use these the way you would any other graham cracker. I know a lot of people buy boxes of already ground up grams. If you want to do a gluten-free version, all you have to do, smash up your crackers, throw them in a food processor. They crumble up really nicely. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing an entire batch worth with your fingers, but if you feel like having a little fun getting your hands dirty, go for it. Otherwise, throw it right into your food processor and pulse it until it's finely ground, and then use it as if you were making a normal pie crust recipe. You don't need a special recipe, just follow the recipe using your very own homemade gluten-free graham cracker crumbs. Good luck and enjoy.